Hope everybody's doing well. Just to introduce myself really quick, my name is Jason Nelson. I am the security practice lead for ePlus for the Southeast. I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina. For anyone who doesn't know ePlus, we're a value-added reseller consultancy firm. We have a pure security practice, publicly traded, approaching $4 billion. So, my job today is, well, I guess I'll ask, how many times have you heard AI so far today? About a billion. Really, my main focus here is presenting the security ramifications of AI, both from the practitioner side, so how is AI being utilized in a SOC, in a security environment, as well as how is AI being used against, as adversaries are using AI. So really we titled this kind of two sides of the same coin, but what I want to start off with the basis of is some of you in here are going to be way more knowledgeable about everything when it comes to building your own model, building out your own AI security practice. But I want you to look at it as just as good as you are at building it to automate whatever you need to do in cybersecurity, you have to understand that there's the reverse side, which is adversaries are using it in a like manner against you. So we're going to focus on two sides of that coin. So the first side is, how are you utilizing AI from a SOC perspective? Are you integrating it with your SIEM? Are you doing any hyper automation? How are you making your teams better, faster, quicker, stronger with the budget that you have today? So that's utilizing AI, the power of AI. The flip side of that is, what are the emerging threats? What are we seeing? Where are we seeing people struggle? And again, the thing that I enjoy about my job is, like I said, based in Charlotte, but I have everything from the largest hospital system in Texas, largest hospital system in North Carolina, to small mom and pop. So I go Fortune 50 to all the way down to kind of mom and pops. So this solve and these problems hit every single customer, every single person. Everybody's facing the same challenges. So let's dive in and kind of talk about some industry trends that we see. So the first piece is, again, this is going to be a cheesy question, but by a show of hands, how many people have some sort of generative AI project either started, in the middle, or planned? Most of you. So what we see is from Gartner, again, depending on how you feel about Gartner, roughly about 30% of projects will be abandoned right after proof of concept. I actually would argue that the rate is higher than that, and it's largely due to a couple factors. First is bad data. So crap in, crap out. That is the ultimate funnel, and we're going to talk a lot about, when it comes to AI security, the data-centric security aspects of that are the underpinning of every AI project. And here's the secret. It was the same 5 years ago. It was the same 10 years ago. If you don't secure the data, nothing else really matters. If you can't prove that you have strong data governance, data classification, data visibility, nothing else really matters. We see really poor risk controls. So overprivileged access. People are getting way more information than they ever should based on job roles. Again, lack of strong data controls. The big one that we see more often than not is the costs get exponentially blown out of the water. So everyone says, hey, I want to do this. They get a little seeding money, and then they come to find out that actually storing that amount of data, using that amount of computing power, all of that is going to run the budget. And then, again, one of the most important things is, can you actually prove your business use case? So, hey, I want to do this, whether it be the lower level, a chat bot, or is it, hey, I want to do a helper bot, or things like that. Or if I'm doing far more sophisticated data modeling, can I actually articulate to the business how the security practice helped the business? And then, again, most of you raised your hands, but about 75% we see are planning to do some kind of AI project. The problem again is, do I have the right people? Do I have the right processes? Do I have the right security? So I'm not going to call on anyone, but I'd like you to think about, when you think about your organization, where are you in the terms of your AI readiness? So we at ePlus have broken this down into really 3 main areas. So AI curious, this is where we see the vast majority of people right now. They're really interested in how can I use AI to actually build my practice? How can I help to show the business value? But really the inflection point is, what do I do? Do I build it myself? Do I go all in with some kind of partnership? Do I have the strong data controls to actually utilize these projects? I'm sure many of you have been involved, whether personally or you have friends or coworkers that did hey, we're going to turn on a Copilot. They turned on Copilot and they shut that thing off real fast, because as soon as someone put in their first query and they pulled back HR records, and people, oh, no, we're just kidding. Sorry, we are absolutely not going to do that, because they didn't have the proper controls around it. When we move towards AI ready, this is where we see roughly 40 to 50% of customers is they're really looking to build the value for the business use cases. They may not have all the controls in place, but like they said, they have these clearly defined use cases. They're getting leadership buy-in to do something about it. But again, do they have the strategy and governance? In this AI mature, I'll be very candid. I've probably got 1 to 2 customers out of several hundred that I would actually put in that category, that they are rocking and rolling, they are ready to go, and it's something where you actually have AI as a core business driver for your business initiatives. So when we talk about AI project trends, most of you are going to fall in with what you're looking to do in a couple different categories. So the first is what I would call the low-hanging fruit. It's the chatbots, it's the co-pilots, it's, hey, I can turn this on tomorrow. Question is, should you turn it on tomorrow? But that's really productivity. And that, from a security standpoint, the hardest aspect is the business will see the value. Oh, we're going to reduce ticket times, we're going to reduce congestion, we're going to do all of these things. You as security practitioners are likely the people going, I don't know about that. I'm not secure about it. I don't know if that's secure. I don't know how I feel about that. And security can be seen as someone slowing the business down. Where we see a lot of people is these IT efficiencies. So AI ops, SecOps, automation. We're going to talk about this quite a bit. This is when we talk about the 2 sides of that coin, is how is AI being utilized to actually make your team faster. And then the last piece that we talk about is very business specific. This is when your team is standing in front of the business going, hey, we are going to increase revenue, or we're going to drive costs down, which is basically the same thing as increasing revenue. We're going to get to the market faster. So when you look at all of these pieces, the question I want you to keep into your brain for the rest of this presentation is, do I have the governance and policies built around AI in order to make that a secure and businessly effective projects? So when we talk about the SOC power AI automation, so this is a chart I really love, and I want to kind of talk through, but we look at this as kind of the modern SOC platform. So traditionally, we looked at, okay, I've got my security tools, whether they're SaaS, whether they're on-prem, whether they're on-premise, on the endpoint, whatever. So I'm feeding that to maybe I'm feeding that to a SIEM, maybe I'm feeding it to some kind of log aggregation correlation engine. Great, we've been doing that for a number of years. What the problem that always admits from that is, wow, I've got a lot of data and I've got nobody to churn through it. I don't care if you work for a Fortune 50 company, the chances that you're going to look me in the eye and go, hey, we've got all the people we could ever need. There's probably about 3 companies in the entire United States that are going, hey, yeah, we've got a staff of 2,000. Let's be very clear. Most of you are running in a skeleton crew because the business doesn't want to hire more people. So how do we fix this? What do we do? So I have all of these great security tools, and you'll hear me very clearly from an ePlus perspective. Like, I sell everything on this chart. Like, I partner with most of these organizations. The question is, where do you invest, and where do you move towards a single source product, like a platformization? Hey, I'm going to go all in with these platforms. Where do I want to go best of breed, things like that. So in a modern SOC platform, where we see pieces changing, and where I want you to start thinking of is, you look at this chart and you go, okay, I've got great security tools. I invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars on tooling. Okay, then I've now moved to, hey, I've got cloud platforms that I've got to protect, I've got to secure. Great. What does that entail? More data, more information, more needles in the needle stack. And so traditionally what we saw is the rise of SIEMs. We've seen the rise of next-gen SIEM. We've seen the rise of whatever Gartner wants to put an acronym on. But that's still not enough. So what are we talking about now when we're utilizing AI for a SOC platform? And what we're seeing is 3, 4, 5 years ago, everyone stood up here and it was SOAR. That's what everybody talked about: security orchestration, automation. And guess what happened? I would argue that for most of your organizations, you looked at a SOAR platform, you looked at some kind of automation, and you went, I don't know, I'm not going to have anything other than a human actually knock that machine offline, especially when it comes to healthcare, finance. Am I going to take those devices offline? The answer 9 times out of 10 was, I want a human to make that decision. So what we're starting to see is we have these SOAR platforms, the hyper automation, and then we're pushing towards a lot of SOC startups that are really saying, hey, for the last couple years, we've been talking about AI, and that's the biggest buzzword. How do we help a cybersecurity person who implicitly does not trust anything to actually trust an AI engine? And so when we talk about actually moving towards utilizing AI for a SOC, we have to say, let's be really honest with ourselves. What do I want my AI to do? What do I want it to help me sort through? So what we saw on the first side is, hey, and this for the record is off of Splunk, but hey, I want an AI engine to start reviewing my models, reviewing my data sources, reviewing my SIM alerts, and actually trying to do some predictive analysis off that. That's great. I am 100% behind that. But what we're starting to see is that every single security company that you operate with has some kind of AI chatbot. They have some kind of AI modeling behind it. And what you end up having is 17 sources of AI that are not talking to each other, that have completely different rules, regulations, governance behind them. And you are then filled with 17 sources of truth that you can do very little with. And so when we talk about this agentic AI platforms, what we're seeing is we're having all of these sources of information that really don't help you find that needle in the needle stack anymore, because they're not talking to each other. So what do we do? Where we say, hey, I want to use SOC automation, I want to do all these things, but how do I do it? So first and foremost, when we talk about the securing of AI, I am someone who, I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years now, and I look back to what we talked about forever, which was data security, identity security, endpoint security, like the basics. You can go with identity all the way back to AAA. So if I can't authenticate a user and I don't know who it is and I can't trust that it's Jason Nelson doing that action, nothing else really matters. If I can't trust the data, whether it's coming from an AI model, whether it's coming from an endpoint, if I can't trust the data and know that it's secure, that's classified, nothing else really matters. And then again, from an endpoint perspective, is if I can't trust that machine, whether that be a server, a laptop, whatever, if I can't trust that is who I think it is, nothing else really matters. And so when we talk about securing AI, I really want you to focus on, do you have the governance frameworks built around that aspect. So what does that mean? So first and foremost, it's focusing on policies. It's focusing on what am I allowing a user to do with all of that data. So I have sensitive information, I have critical data. Am I obfuscating it? Am I making sure that only certain business people have access to it? Am I breaking it up by lines of business? How am I segmenting that data? And then what we're going to talk about in a little bit is how am I pushing that into everything from runtime security? How am I pushing in DLP? How am I doing all of those things? How am I protecting the model from model poisoning? Those are all the security of AI. And then again, like we've talked about for the first couple minutes, is we have AI for security. So again, that automation, the piece that we really have started to see a big increase in is using threat intelligence. Again, being able to pull from hundreds and thousands of sources of information, and then ultimately you making a decision of, am I going to go with pure play vendors that have their own agentic AI? Do I want to build something myself? What makes the most business use case for you and your organizations? So I'm going to take a quick break. Any questions on anything that I've covered so far? Everyone's in stunned shock silence. So we'll get into, everyone's familiar with OWASP, but we talk about the top 10 across a number of different areas. But when we talk about the top 10 for LLM, generative AI, we're going to talk a lot about data poisoning, data model. That comes to how am I actually protecting the data? How am I securing it? We talk about prompt injection. How do I actually protect what's being processed? How do I make sure that it's secure, that it's not anything that I don't want getting outside of my organization? And we're seeing this especially get really, really tricky when there's partnerships with, whether it be competitors, whether it be sister organizations, anything like that, is how am I protecting that data when it moves off-prem? So when we look at kind of emerging threats, this is an eye chart. I know, I'm going to walk through it, but a couple of the things that we're seeing when we talk about the, protecting security, protecting AI, we're seeing everyone has seen the really fun deepfake social media. But why does that matter for anyone here? If you don't work for a political organization, where are we seeing this? I've personally been a part of a customer calling me, saying that they got a video from the CEO that was asking for, money to be transferred. This is no different than what we handled, again, 4 or 5 years ago, from an email, from a phishing campaign, and we'll get into kind of the phishing. But these deep fake in social engineering, it's the same impersonation, it's the same use of someone's likeness in order to trick an end user into doing something they would normally not do. The thing I want to jump up and down and talk about is this is no different than what we've dealt with as an organization for the last 15 to 20 years. We're making sure that end users are not tricked into giving up information that they otherwise would not. We see this a lot when we talk about the use of AI for phishing. Anyone who's been in the security practice or industry for a long time, we got really surprised when phishing attacks started to know people's names. They started to say, "Oh, I know. Would you like a Chick-fil-A gift card? We know. Bet you like Chick-fil-A." Or we found out through your social media that you like the Carolina Panthers. Click this button for some, Carolina Panthers tickets. Things like that. But what we're seeing is we're actually using LLM to not just be perfect, but to be imperfect. And what I mean by that is make it look, sound like a human being. We are far past the days of a prince from a foreign nation asking for money to be sent, but it's still the same premise. We talk about ransomware. Again, I'm going to go on this one quickly, but again, being able to take ransomware kind of to the next level, accelerate that reconnaissance, use those large language models to make it that much more perfect. Really, when we talk about data poisoning, data tampering. This is the aspect that I'm going to harp on quite a bit. And again, this comes down to, do I have proper data security controls around all of my information? I present to a lot of CISOs, a lot of CIOs, and I always like to ask the question, and it's one of the most telling questions you can ask is, if you ask someone, hey, talk to me about your data security strategy. Oh, I've got that handled. I'm great. No one who has ever done it well has ever said, that's not keeping me up at night. It's the people who are saying, hey, I'm great. I know where all of my sensitive data is. Do you? If you really do, I'd like to meet you and talk with you, because you are light years ahead of most everybody else. It is where we started to turn on, when we moved from on-premise to cloud, and everyone went, oh, my data is everywhere. It's the same premise that we're seeing now with these LLMs and AI is, hey, I'm going to put my information anywhere and everywhere. So if you as an organization, do you have strong controls around what your end users are allowed to do? Are they allowed to use ChatGPT? Are they allowed to upload documents? What are they allowed to do? And again, when we talk about your own AI information, is how do you make sure and protect it from poisoning? I have the privilege of working again with the largest hospital system in Texas. They do a tremendous amount of cancer research. Their biggest focus is data poisoning, because they have already been attacked on a multitude of occasions with a tremendous amount of fake cancer files, fake scans, fake documentation that are skewing their entire cancer research. Why? Because people are evil. But when you look at that and you go, I can kick this, and it's the idea of a container ship or a battleship, you don't have to move it 180 degrees. If you move it 2 degrees either way, over the span of a number of miles, they're vastly off course. And that's the main risk when we talk about data poisoning. When we talk about prompt injection attacks, again, runtime protection, malicious endpoints being able to manipulate that data into either giving up more information than it should, or disclosing data that it should not. So again, data leakage is the main concern there. And then I talked kind of at the beginning, there's this focus on identity. Either I understand who the user is or I don't. We're starting to see a big push towards bypassing MFA, being able to use those valid identities, again, because Gartner's latest chart is that I think it's 72% of cyber attacks use valid credentials. So they're using and harvesting credentials from your organization. They are either creating separate AI-generated accounts, or they're acting and learning how to look exactly like you. So again, with all of these threats and all of this focus, and all of this talk for this entire day will be about AI, the questions I want you to walk away with, again, is if your organization is pushing towards this, then the questions I want you to ask is, how secure is my data? How secure is my users' access to that data? If you start there and say, when we get that handled, we can do whatever we want. But again, most organizations are struggling and will continue to struggle with that data classification, data visibility, and that governance built around it. So what are some of the things that we focus on? So I will always talk about, you have to focus on proper policy, procedure, governance. So have to align my AI initiatives with the governance programs that you've already built. If your governance structure, if your GRC program has not been rewritten to include AI, you must focus on that. You must focus on building that out the right way. So we talk about privacy, regulatory compliance, trust, data governance. All of those are kind of the foundational underpinnings of what you should do from a security practice. And I want to say this, you're not too late if you're behind the 8 ball. It is a situation where you might have to say, hey, pause the ship for a little bit, as a security practice, we have to get all of our ducks in a row before we do this. So this is something that we do all day, every day from a consultancy. But again, coming in, reviewing policies, building out that classification and management structure, and then again, focusing on the data and focusing on the identity. I will continue to say, if you do anything, you learn anything from all of this conversation, it's that you have to focus on the basics. In my opinion, when we talk about AI, it is back to the basics. Control the user, control the machine, control the access. So when we talk about all of these great things, you've now decided we're going to go full bore into AI adoption. We're going to build out a business use case. We're going to present it to whoever I need to for funding. What do you as a security practice need to do? So the first and foremost, and again, this goes back to going back to the basics. So firewall, proper segmentation. Everyone now, again, if I go back 2 years ago, what was the buzzword of the day? Zero trust. Everything was zero trust architecture, being able to focus on that. We are still at that same precipice. We have to focus on, if I'm going to push towards AI model, if I'm going to push towards all of these business use case, how do I segment it? How do I build out that zero trust type model? Maybe that's firewalling. It's definitely segmentation. Again, we're getting proper security controls pushed all the way down. Secondly, we talk about identity and access control. When we focus on, again, how can I, with near 100% certainty, say this is Jason Nelson presenting this action? So multi-factor, not exciting anymore. Used to be the easiest, most push button way, literally push button, to say, hey, I've added additional security. But what we're already seeing is adversaries crack that with MFA floods, and where I'm just going to keep prompting you until someone finally clicks yes. Then we have to focus on, when we talk about that data security structure, is role-based access control. So does that person need that data to fulfill their task? If the answer is no, then they should never have access. Can we get as granular as possible, creating those identity controls, creating that structure so that when the data moves, whether the data moves between models, whether the data moves from on-premise to cloud, no matter where that data resides, only the people that need that access have it, and most importantly, not for an indeterminate amount of time. They have it in order to fulfill their task, and then that access is revoked. This is one of the newer pieces that we're starting to see, is when we actually talk about building in content guardrails. So again, this is a focus on how am I actually protecting the runtime of whatever I'm using. So making sure that I'm doing filtering, making sure that the models can't be poisoned. This is where we step in and we go, this is where we can both utilize AI for the SOC and against the SOC. And we have adversaries using AI against the SOC. So how am I focusing on that content moderation? This is, again, kind of eating your own dog food, but allowing that model and training that model, teaching that model, and then most important, putting structure around it to make sure that if I have sensitive data, it's masked or it's obfuscated. If I have a social security number, it's not going to leave the organizations. Again, basic structure. But in this week or this day of presentations on AI, I just want you to focus on it's back to the basics time. And then the final piece, when we talk about actual usage controls, we're seeing a giant expansion towards smart security devices, smart security controls. This is where your agentic AI can play in. But again, it's actually reviewing the usage, reviewing the data, reviewing the user's behavior, and determining, are they doing it? Are they acting as they should? And most importantly, am I logging and auditing that piece to make sure that I have a proper access control log of who did what action? Because again, without that, nothing else matters. So I just want you to kind of focus when we talk about the two sides of that same coin. I feel like as a security practitioner, when AI started to kind of bubble up and it was what everyone wanted to talk about, I immediately said no. I said, this is not, a security team is never going to be able to run as fast as your business wants to, and you're not going to. So your job in the security world is to enable the business as securely as possible, slow them down as little as possible while making sure that we have the right content, we have the right structure in place, and making sure that your organization's data is safe. So I want you to focus on, as you walk through the rest of the booths and think through the rest of the day, is AI does not have to be scary. It does not have to be something that we want to avoid. We don't want to be in the business of no. We do want to be in the business of, I need to get my house in order before I do this. So any questions on anything that we kind of talked about? Not a single one.
Segmentation, like AI really falls down into more security. You start looking at, say you have a classified, but then you have RAG data that's also queried, and you have MCP clients data, pulling data outside of that. So that boundary is now no longer just in a zone.
Mm-hmm.
Components all around for data sources. But from authentication to DOP on the front end, where the user interfacing, how do you do that on behavioral analysis and detect is the data retrieval? Even though you can mask it in the model, there could be cases where a user should see that data, then other users shouldn't see that data. How are you addressing that scenario with our corporation?
Yeah, the short answer is if anyone walks up to you and goes, hey, I've got this thing that's going to solve all your problems, it's not true. I don't care if anyone's saying, hey, I've got your magic bullet that's going to solve all of that. Again, when you talk about obfuscating the data, you talk about strong identity-based, role-based access, saying, hey, you should have access to this data. Another person sitting beside you shouldn't. When it gets that granular, it gets tough. And I wish I had a better answer for you to go, again, I've got this magic bullet that's going to solve. I laugh every time I go to RSA conference and you look at the little booths that end up getting gobbled up by the big booths, and every one of them saying, I've got a perfect solve for this. My focus when it comes to that is kind of a 90-10 rule. If I can structure 90% of the data, I can deal with the 10% one-offs. So if I can focus on, I've protected 90% of, these roles should never have access to this, these roles should, that 10% actually becomes manageable. So when you actually have to go to someone and go, hey, I need this for this, this role, but it's going to move between, models, and you go, okay, we're going to build a policy around that specific use case. Again, it's not a perfect answer, but I'm going to focus on the 90-10 and structure as best I can. And then that 10% candidly is going to be a little bit of a, as needed basis. And again, I know it's not a great answer, but it's an honest one. Any other questions? All right. Well, with that, I'm ending a little bit early, so everybody can have a little bit of extra bathroom time. I appreciate everyone's time, and I'll be up here if anyone has any other questions. Thanks, everybody.